The morning sunlight sliced through the blinds, casting a warm, deceptive glow across their bedroom. Amelia watched Ethan as he slept, his face a picture of serene contentment, a stark contrast to the storm churning inside her. On the surface, their life was a masterpiece of domestic bliss. A sun-drenched apartment, filled with the scent of fresh coffee, a shared calendar full of hikes and dinner parties, and a love that felt as solid as the foundation of their building. They were the couple their friends envied, the ones who had it all. But beneath this polished veneer, something was rotting. A flash of chrome and shattered glass, the screech of tires. The world had gone sideways in a horrifying instant. That night, 2 years ago, was a memory they had buried deep, sealed away in the unspoken language of shared glances and hurried changes of subject. It was their secret, their unshakable bond forged in fear and silence. But silence, Amelia was learning, was not an empty space. It was a breeding ground for ghosts. She tiptoed to the kitchen, the floorboards groaning a protest she knew only she could hear. Each sound, each normal, everyday action, felt like a performance. The cheerful whistle of the kettle was a lie. The way Ethan kissed her good morning, his lips brushing away her anxieties, was a brilliant act. He never spoke of it, the night their car had veered off the road and hit something, or someone. He had simply taken her hand, told her everything would be okay, and they had never called the police. His calmness was either a superpower or a terrifying form of control. Lately, she wasn't sure which. Amelia poured herself a cup of coffee, her hand trembling slightly. The news of David's disappearance had just broken, and with it the perfect facade of their life was starting to crack. The television in the living room was humming, a low, ominous sound, and she knew she couldn't avoid it forever. It was only a matter of time before the past they buried would come knocking. The television screen flickered, a woman with a somber expression reporting on the local news. The headline graphic flashed in a corner, "Missing artist David Riley." Amelia froze, the coffee cup rattling in her hand. Her world, so carefully constructed, suddenly felt like a house of cards in a hurricane. She could feel the color drain from her face, the familiar warmth of the kitchen replaced by a chilling dread that started in her stomach and spread like a poison through her veins. David. His face, a ghost from their shared unspoken past, stared out from the screen. Ethan walked into the room, his voice calm and steady. "Morning, babe. You okay?" His question was a statement, an observation of her visible distress. Amelia's gaze was locked on the screen. The reporter described David as an eccentric but beloved member of the community. Last seen 3 days ago. Amelia felt a hot, prickling sensation behind her eyes. This wasn't just a news story. It was a consequence. Consequence they had buried but had now unearthed itself, screaming for attention. Did you know him?" Ethan's voice was softer now, but it held a strange, clinical curiosity that set her teeth on edge. Amelia finally turned to him, her eyes wide with a fear she couldn't hide. "Of course I did, Ethan. He was a friend. From before. Before we met." Her words were a lie, a flimsy veil she knew he would see through. David was more than a friend. He was a piece of the past they had tried to erase, and his sudden disappearance was a seismic event in their carefully balanced lives. Ethan's expression remained perfectly unreadable. He walked to the television and, with a casual flick of the remote, muted the sound. The silence that followed was suffocating. "What's wrong, Amelia? It's just a news story. People go missing all the time." His lack of concern was a stark, chilling contrast to her internal turmoil. His composure was a wall, and Amelia felt a desperate urge to smash it down. "Just a news story?" Her voice cracked, a quiet eruption of her panic. "Don't you understand? It could connect back to us. Everything we did." The last words were a whisper, a ghost of the secrets they held. Ethan looked at her then, his eyes a cold, unwavering blue. "It won't. We handled it. There's nothing to worry about." He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch meant to be comforting, but to Amelia it felt like a shackle. She knew that look, that quiet confidence. It meant he had a plan, and she was already part of it, whether she liked it or not. The cracks in their perfect life were becoming fissures, and as she stood there, shaking, she realized this was only the beginning. Ethan's calm had done nothing to soothe her. If anything, it had only amplified her fear. He had gone to work with the same cheerful goodbye as any other day, leaving Amelia alone in a house that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a crime scene. Her eyes, once blind to the imperfections, now saw every misplaced object as a potential clue. She found the first one in the back of a kitchen drawer, a half-smoked cigarette. Neither of them smoked. She held it, turning the cheap paper over in her fingers, the faint smell of stale tobacco a jarring intruder in their clean, airy space. When she confronted Ethan about it later, he simply shrugged. Maybe it's from the last party. You know how friends can be. He said it so easily, a dismissive wave of his hand that made her feel foolish for even asking. Then came the button, a small worn-out pearl button, nestled in the folds of a blanket on the sofa. It was old, the kind of button you'd find on a vintage coat. It was definitely not theirs. Amelia held it, her heart thumping against her ribs. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, that their house wasn't a sanctuary but a haunted space. When she showed it to Ethan, he sighed, his voice edged with a practiced patience. Amelia, you're being paranoid. We had the cleaners in yesterday. It could be from anyone. Are you sleeping okay? His questions were subtle daggers, each one designed to make her question her own sanity. She felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, his quiet gaslighting turning her solid world into a quagmire of doubt. Driven by a desperate need for answers, she began her own search. She felt like a detective in her own home, a stranger in her own life. She went through closets, looked under furniture, her hands shaking with a frantic energy. Her search led her to the one place in the apartment they rarely used, the attic. The pull was magnetic, an irrational certainty that the key to her unease lay hidden among the dusty boxes and forgotten memories. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, and dust motes danced in the single shaft of light from a small window. She rummaged through old boxes filled with Christmas decorations and childhood trinkets. Then she saw it. Tucked behind a large, forgotten trunk was a small, leather-bound journal. It was scuffed and worn, but she recognized it instantly. It was David's. Her breath hitched in her throat as she opened the first page, her fingers tracing his familiar, looping handwriting. The date on the first entry was just 2 weeks before he went missing. She had found a piece of him, a ghost in her own home, and a terrifying link to a past she wasn't ready to face. The journal in her hands felt both alien and intimately familiar. Its worn pages held not just David's story, but a hidden history of the man she had married. She sat on the attic floor, the dust motes swirling around her like silent witnesses. The first entries were filled with a raw, desperate affection for Ethan. He had been David's best friend, his confidant, and something more complicated that the words hinted at, but never fully explained. There was a deep sense of betrayal, of a friendship twisted by secrets, and an unrequited love that festered into resentment. Amelia's hands trembled as she turned the pages, her mind racing to reconcile the man in the journal with the man who shared her bed. The narration shifted, weaving David's voice into the present. Ethan has everything. The perfect life, the perfect wife. And he wants to pretend I don't exist, that our past is a figment of my imagination. But I won't let him, not after everything he took from me. Amelia felt a cold dread creep up her spine. The perfect life he spoke of was hers. The words felt like a direct accusation. The entries grew darker, more frantic. David described a series of escalating confrontations with Ethan. He mentioned threats, veiled and then overt, about revealing a past he desperately wanted to keep hidden. A past Amelia knew nothing about, but which was slowly, terrifyingly coming into focus. The final entry, scrawled in a frantic hand, was a desperate confession. I went to his studio. I knew he was meeting someone. He wasn't alone. I was going to confront him about everything. The money he stole, the way he destroyed my reputation. But he saw me. He told me to leave. I can't. This has to end tonight. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. All of it. Amelia's breath hitched. A final, desperate confrontation. The words were a knife in her heart. She flipped to the next page, but it was blank. The last words David ever wrote were an open-ended threat, and they led directly to his disappearance. The journal didn't explain what happened, but it painted a clear picture of motive. As she held the journal, The weight of a past she never knew became suffocating. The man she thought she knew was a stranger, a manipulative, angry man capable of more than she could ever have imagined. The journal was more than a confession. It was a ghost whispering a warning in her ear. She heard the front door open downstairs. Ethan was home. She clutched the journal to her chest, her mind racing. The police would come. She knew it. The only question was whether she would be ready for them. The sharp, insistent ring of the doorbell was a sound she had been expecting, but was utterly unprepared for. It cut through the quiet of the apartment like a gunshot, sending a jolt of pure adrenaline through her veins. Amelia's hand flew to her mouth, and she took a frantic step back as if the door itself were a threat. Through the peephole, she saw two grim faces and the unmistakable navy uniforms of the police. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of guilt and fear. Ethan's voice, calm and steady from the next room, called out, "I'll get it." She watched, frozen, as he opened the door, a polite, practiced smile on his face. He was in his element, a master of deception. The two detectives introduced themselves. "We're here about David Riley," one said, his gaze sweeping over the pristine living room. Amelia felt her composure slipping, a bead of sweat tracing a cold path down her back. Her hands, clenching and unclenching at her sides, were betraying her. Ethan stepped forward, his body language a subtle shield. He invited them inside, offering them coffee, his voice a smooth, confident river flowing around her frozen state. "We knew him, of course," Ethan began, "but it's been a while. We were so shocked to hear about his disappearance." His words were a carefully constructed narrative, each one a brick in the wall of their innocence. The detectives listened, their eyes trained on Ethan, but every now and then they would dart to Amelia as if searching for a tell. She felt their scrutiny like a physical weight. Her mind screamed for her to say something, to confess, to scream that her husband was a liar, but her throat was dry and the words wouldn't come. Ethan's hand came to rest on the small of her back, a seemingly affectionate gesture, but she felt the subtle pressure, the silent command to be still, to be quiet. The interrogation was less a question and answer and more a performance by Ethan. He recounted their movements from the day David disappeared with a confident ease that was terrifying. He even brought up the old car accident, but framed it as a minor fender bender they had moved on from, a throwaway anecdote. He was an artist, painting a picture of a couple who had nothing to hide. Amelia was merely a prop in his scene, a silent, trembling figure who nodded when he expected her to, her entire being screaming with the effort of not breaking. When the detectives finally left, the silence that fell was more oppressive than any noise. The front door clicked shut, a final definitive sound. Amelia looked at Ethan, her face a mask of terror. He didn't meet her gaze. He simply walked to the kitchen and began to put the kettle on, as if nothing had happened. His calm was not a sign of peace, but a monstrous, chilling thing. It was then that Amelia knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the walls of their perfect life had completely unraveled, and she was trapped inside the ruins with a ghost. The next day, Ethan left for work with a casual kiss on her cheek, a ghost of a smile on his lips. His eerie calmness from the night before persisted, leaving Amelia in a silent, suffocating hell. She felt like she was a character in a play, waiting for the curtain to fall and expose the terrible truth. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen, her paranoia at an all-time high. It was a text. "Amelia, this is Sarah. We met at David's art show a few years ago. I need to talk to you. It's about David. Meet me at the coffee shop on Elm Street, please." Amelia stared at the message, a sudden flicker of hope igniting within her. Someone else knew something. Someone was breaking through the silence. The coffee shop was buzzing with morning chatter, but when Amelia saw Sarah, the noise seemed to fall away. Sarah's face, pale and serious, was a stark contrast to the lively atmosphere. Sarah was a stranger, yet her presence felt like a lifeline. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, her voice a low murmur. "I know this is strange, but I had to talk to you. The police aren't getting anywhere, and I feel like they're missing something." Her gaze was unwavering, direct. Amelia's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ethan was a friend of David's, wasn't he? The question was a simple one, but it held a terrifying weight. They were very close. And then they weren't. David was terrified of Ethan in the months before he disappeared. He said Ethan was blackmailing him, threatening to ruin his career. David kept a journal. He was paranoid Ethan would get his hands on it. A bolt of ice shot through Amelia's veins. She knew this journal. It was in her purse, a physical link to the conspiracy she was now a part of. Sarah was a stranger, but she was voicing all of Amelia's own secret fears. "I don't know what you're talking about," Amelia lied, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She clutched her purse, her fingers digging into the leather. A silent, panicked gesture. Sarah's expression softened, but her eyes held a chilling intensity. "I think you do. I think you're scared. But you need to know. David told me everything. You're not the one I'm afraid of. It's him. He's the one who's dangerous." The words hung in the air, a cold comfort that confirmed her worst fears. Sarah wasn't just a concerned acquaintance. She was a witness, a potential ally or a new enemy. Amelia didn't know which, but she knew she couldn't trust anyone. Not even the woman who just confirmed her husband was a monster. As Sarah's eyes bore into hers, Amelia saw not a worried friend, but a cunning, calculating force with a truth of her own. Amelia's hands were still shaking as she unlocked the front door. The conversation with Sarah played on a loop in her head, each word a new, damning piece of evidence. She placed David's journal on the coffee table, its worn leather cover a silent indictment. This was no longer about paranoia. It was about truth. When Ethan finally arrived home, the air in the apartment was thick with an unshakable tension. He walked in, a casual ease to his movements, but the moment his eyes landed on the journal, his smile vanished. "What is this, Amelia?" His voice was cold, stripped of its usual charm. "You know what it is," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "And I just spoke to Sarah, David's friend. She told me everything you did to him. The blackmail, the threats. She says he was terrified of you." Ethan's face tightened. He tried to dismiss it, his tone dripping with patronizing calm. "Amelia, this is absurd. This woman is unhinged. You're letting her get to you." "I'm not," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "I found this in the attic. This is a confession, Ethan. David's last words. He was going to expose you. He was going to tell everyone about what you stole from him. And he wrote that he saw you that night. So tell me, where is he?" Her question hung in the air, a final ultimatum. Ethan's perfect facade finally cracked. A sigh, almost of relief, escaped his lips. The mask of the loving husband fell away, revealing something far more sinister. He didn't deny it. He walked to the window, staring out at the streetlights as he spoke. "You think I would be so foolish as to murder someone? I'm smarter than that, Amelia. Murder is for amateurs. It's messy. You leave a body a trail of evidence. This was a masterpiece." His confession wasn't what she expected. He detailed how he had systematically ruined David, stealing his art, planting fake reviews, sabotaging his grants. He'd meticulously driven David to a breaking point, a state of psychological breakdown. "He was so desperate to escape me," Ethan continued, a dark pride in his voice. "He was a ghost long before he vanished. I didn't have to kill him. I just convinced him there was nowhere left to go." Amelia stood frozen, a cold horror seeping into her bones. This was worse than murder. This was an act of complete and utter soul destruction. The man she loved was a sociopath, a puppet master who had not only destroyed David, but had been subtly, expertly manipulating her too. Every shared secret, every moment of intimacy had been a lie. He turned from the window, his eyes finally meeting hers. "We're in this together, Amelia. From the moment we drove past that night, we were bound. You are my accomplice. You have been from the beginning." The words were a shackle, a final confirmation that her entire life was a lie, and the cost of the truth was her own freedom. Ethan's words echoed in the tense silence of the apartment, a final, damning truth. "You are my accomplice." He wasn't just confessing to a crime. He was shackling her to it. Amelia felt the full weight of her moral dilemma. To go to the police meant destroying the life she had built, a life that was a beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. It meant facing public scrutiny, possible prison time, and the complete annihilation of everything she held dear. But to stay silent meant becoming a full-fledged partner in Ethan's twisted game. It meant a lifetime of quiet fear, of living with a ghost, a constant reminder of the darkness that now defined her. She looked at the journal on the table, at her husband's impassive face, and felt the impossible chasm between right and wrong. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting another message from Sarah. Instead, it was an old family friend, a retired detective named George. "Amelia, just checking in. I heard about David. The story feels incomplete. I had a few questions." Amelia's heart seized. She felt a flicker of hope. George had been a father figure to her, a man of unwavering integrity. If anyone could help her, it was him. But what would he think of her? Of Ethan? She met him for coffee the next day, a desperate act of rebellion. George was sharp, his eyes missing nothing. He didn't press her, but his questions were precise, cutting through the fluff of her pre-rehearsed lies. He asked about Ethan, about their relationship, about the car accident she had long forgotten. His gaze was kind but unwavering, and she felt herself unraveling. When she finally broke down, the tears came in a flood, a release of all the fear and shame she had held in for so long. "Amelia," he said softly, "is there something you want to tell me?" His words were a lifeline, an invitation to a truth she was terrified to speak. It was her moment to choose justice or silence. As she stared into his eyes, she knew the choice she had to make. But as she began to speak, her mind flashed back to the car accident and a memory she had suppressed. It was her, not Ethan, who had swerved. Forgotten memory resurfaced, and she realized the true depth of the web of lies she had been a part of. She was not just a victim, but a perpetrator, and George's compassionate face suddenly felt like a trap. The cost of her truth was more than just her freedom. It was the entire foundation of her life. Amelia's sudden silence, her face a mask of dawning horror, was all the answer George needed. His expression shifted from compassionate to concerned, as if he was seeing her for the first time. The words she had been about to speak, the confession about Ethan, about David, died on her lips, replaced by a horrifying, crystal-clear memory. The car accident. It wasn't Ethan who had been driving. It was her. And it wasn't an accident. The narrative rewound, a sickening playback of that night. Ethan had been in the passenger seat. They were arguing, the subject a new, lucrative business deal. He had been so insistent she'd take the turn, despite her reservations. He'd leaned over, his hand on the steering wheel, his voice a low, persuasive murmur. "Trust me, Amelia. This is the way. We're running late." He was always so persuasive, so sure of himself. In her moment of hesitation as she looked at him, the car had swerved, and she felt the sickening thump. She remembered his calm hands on her arms, his voice in her ear. "It's okay. It was just a deer. Let's just go home. We'll handle it later." He hadn't just covered up a tragedy. He had orchestrated it. He had masterminded the entire thing, subtly manipulating her into a position where she would be responsible. The narrative shifts to show Amelia's complicity in the past. It wasn't a simple tragedy she had believed in. It was a lie she had been expertly coaxed into accepting. The crime was a continuation of a past sin, a dark thread that ran through the fabric of their lives. She wasn't an innocent bystander or a naive victim. She was a partner, a willing accomplice from the very beginning. Her mind reeled with the terrible revelation. David was their witness to the accident. The man they thought they had run over was David. That's why Ethan was blackmailing him. She had spent 2 years believing she had a secret with her husband, a sin they both shared, when in fact, the sin was all hers. He had just convinced her he was holding her hand while she was drowning. Her mind returned to the present, to George's kind, searching eyes. He was offering her a way out, but there was no way out. The truth was far more twisted than a simple murder. It was a calculated, years-long psychological game, and she had been a pawn in it from the start. He hadn't just silenced David. He had silenced her too. As she looked at George, she knew she couldn't confess. The truth wasn't just that Ethan was a monster. The truth was that she had helped create him. She was bound to him not by love, but by a lie so deep she had convinced herself of it. And as the police closed in, she knew the only way out was to continue the lie, to protect the man who had stolen her truth. Amelia's call to George had been a lie, a panicked fabrication to buy time. She returned home, her mind a whirlwind of fragmented memories and Ethan's chilling confession. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. The police sirens, faint at first, then growing louder, were the final, deafening countdown. Was over. The game, the lies, the perfect facade, all of it. She stood by the window watching the flashing red and blue lights paint a horrifying, silent disco on their living room walls. Ethan walked to her side, his hand brushing against hers, a gesture that once felt comforting now felt predatory. He was a shark, sensing the end of the line, and his survival instincts were in full force. He looked at her, and for the first time his calm was gone. There was a desperate, feral edge to his eyes. "They're here," she said, her voice hollow. "I know," he replied, his tone as sharp as broken glass. "They'll take us in. But we have a choice, Amelia. We stick to our story. We say we know nothing. We lie. Together." His words were a desperate plea, an attempt to weave her back into the conspiracy. "Why, Ethan?" Her voice cracked, a raw plea for a truth that no longer existed. "Why did you do all this? Why him? Why me?" His gaze hardened. "It was all for us. David was going to ruin everything. Our life, our future. I couldn't let that happen. And you were the only one who could get us through it. We were a team. Remember?" His voice was a seductive whisper, a final attempt at gaslighting her. "No," she said, the word a blade cutting through his lies. "It was never us, it was you. You used me. You used my mistake. You manipulated me into believing your lies." The rage, the betrayal, the unforgiving truth of it all finally erupted from her. "You didn't protect me, Ethan. You trapped me." He saw the finality in her eyes, the moment she broke free from his influence. His face twisted with rage. "Fine. Then you're on your own, Amelia. You go down for this. You were the one driving that night." The sound of a loud knock on the door cut him off. It was the police. The moment of truth had arrived. There was no more running, no more hiding, no more lies. The dialogue was sharp and final as they faced a choice. Go down together or turn on each other. The last look they shared was not of love, but of two strangers who had committed the most twisted crime together, bound not by love, but by a lie. The sound of the door opening was a final damning note, and the end was only a beginning. The trial of Amelia and Ethan Vance became a media circus. Dubbed the perfect couple's crime, it captivated the nation, with every detail of their twisted conspiracy laid bare. The documentary footage, now years later, shows grainy courtroom sketches and sensational news headlines. The prosecution presented the journal, David's chilling final words, and the testimony of Sarah, a witness who never backed down. But the most damning evidence came from Amelia's own confession, which she gave on the stand, detailing Ethan's calculated gaslighting and her own terrified complicity. Yet, in a shocking twist, Ethan's defense team masterfully painted Amelia not as a victim, but as the true mastermind, pointing to her emotional testimony and the fact that she was the one behind the wheel that night. The jury was deadlocked. Public opinion was divided. The case ended in a mistrial, leaving both free on a technicality, but forever marked. The documentary's final shot is a slow zoom on Amelia, years later, sitting alone on a park bench. She is free, but her eyes are haunted, a silent testament to the secrets she still holds. The narrator's final words hang in the air. When justice fails, what is the true price of freedom? And when a marriage is built on lies, who is truly innocent? The screen fades to black, leaving the audience to ponder the terrifying moral ambiguity of a love story built on a twisted crime.